Hindutva perspective for an alternative global ideology, demise of the isms.
I am more than delighted and honored to be here as well. More than a privilege for me to have this kind of attention given to this book. Sometimes it is better for someone to explain what actually surrounds a book of this nature. And for myself as a South African, of course of Indian origin, why on earth would I write a book of this nature? And try to be, or seemingly provocative, which is not. And I am not being anti anybody or anything. It is important that we look at when somebody writes a book, he or she does so out of a genuine passion for what they are doing. And out of that passion comes a collection of thoughts and a substantive amount of research that is put into writing a book of this nature. But whether mine is substantive enough or qualifies for the kind of recognition that many other writers have got for their work is going to be left to the readers. But I think as a South African, and I'm a third generation South African, depending upon how you work out which is the first generation, my paternal grandfather went to South Africa in 1908 from Muzaffarnagar. My maternal grandparents, I think, came much earlier, so we don't really know. But most Indians, and I think, and I say this with respect, the Indian education system is as bad as the British education system when you don't teach enough of the history about what happened to the indentured laborers. Most people that I speak to around here don't really know when Indians left this country and were taken to work as indentured laborers who worked really under slave conditions. The worst conditions you could ever think about. And for what they actually had to do to achieve stability in the end was marvelous. For every shipload of Indians that were taken to taken to any part of the world, there had to be 75% active labor. 25% only had to be children and women. So you can imagine what a premium was placed on the woman with respect to physiological satisfaction from males and to actually have a loving partner. But over and above that, if the woman was desired by any of the colonial officers, estate or sugar estate managers, then they posted those women's husbands to faraway places to work for weeks on end. And until the women submitted, the husbands were not brought back. So Indians went through an exceptionally tough time. But over and above that, we now have stabilized our gender balance, reconstituted the family structure, and began to build up in ways that at least allows a semblance, or beyond a mere semblance, of stability and integrity that shocked the colonial authorities, the apartheid authorities, the post-apartheid government currently in South Africa. And we continue to be an annoyance to them. An annoyance because of the resilience we have as people who adapt so easily. You know, Indians in Africa are called Black Jews of Africa. And we, perhaps known for our miserliness, I suppose, and the ways we go ahead and, live very frugally to make sure that we don't overdo things. But that's not to say everybody among us are like that. Now, I am an anthropologist. I've just retired last year, and I wanted to finish my career with something that I had a passion for. I wasn't sure what to actually write. But on the 11th of January, 2020, I was given a call by somebody who introduced himself as Yusuf Ismail. And I didn't get his name right, because in our Durban Muslim community, there used to be a Yusuf Didat. Yusuf Didat's father was Ahmad Didat, who is Zakir Naik's guru. So I thought it was he that actually called me. Now this might be unrelated to the book, but I'll bring it to convergence in a moment. And there was 11th of January 2020 was a Saturday. It was a hot day. That was, January. Our summers are from about November to at least April, hot and humid like you have it here. Fortunately, we were on the coastline, and in Durban we have some of the best beaches in the world, but it's being totally destroyed by an exceptionally greedy, stupid government that is just eroding the resources of the country in such a swift way that very soon we might reach bankrupt status. But be that as it may, I was deciding 2020, January, it's time for me to start getting my thoughts together, to put my module together, and to work on my teaching for the year. Now, the South African academic calendar runs along the year from January to December. So I sat for more than an hour thinking what I should do, picked up some books, and just as I was reading, at 11:45, I get this call. Are you Anand Singh? I said, yes. What are you attending a meeting with fascists for tomorrow? I asked him, what do you mean, fascists? He says, well, you guys, and you are one of them, that is setting up a BJP cell and an RSS cell in Durban. And many of us are very unhappy with this because we don't want foreign politics to come in here. So I asked him, how did you get my number? He said, don't worry about that. Okay, how did you get to know about this meeting? It's none of your business. So I was going to cut the call. And he said, but we know that you are an RSS supporter and a BJP supporter. So just as I was about to cut the call, I just suddenly thought, if I cut the call, it's almost taking it for granted that he caught me out and I was going to attend the meeting to set up this RSS come BJP cell in the country. It was nothing near that. I had no intention. I have admiration for the BJP and the RSS. I am not saying they are the ideal components of a transforming India. But on the other hand, the day I see Modi, for instance, hacking up his bank account to a level where he is doing things like what so many other corrupt political leaders have got, I'll simply wash my hands of him and I'll make public statements like I've made of everybody else. But I didn't bother about him, and I said to him, why do you think I'm going for this meeting? He said, no, I know it. But the truth of the matter is, 12th of January is Swami Vivekananda's birthday. And I belong to the Ramakrishna Center there. So I normally attend the Vivekananda birthdays on that day. My friends were close, who were close to me, were having the meeting. They called me. I somewhat agreed. And then this guy continued to attack me personally. And then he said, don't you have anything to say about what the Indian army is doing in Kashmir? I really got angry with him then, and I said, look, whatever you want to try and tout around here, what you need to do is to tell whoever you are trying to attack that they should ask the Pakistanis to stop using Kashmiri youth. If the fully blown and well-equipped Pakistani army couldn't fight the Indian army over 4 to 5 different wars, why are they using youth to do that? Now, I am not fighting for anybody here in India, but I had to give it back to him only because he targeted me because I'm a Hindu. And he targeted me because somebody else seemed to have set them off. And believe it or not, it was actually from the South African Hindu Mahasabha. The people who were having the meeting was to try and create an alternative to the South African Hindu Mahasabha, who are nothing more than a bunch of photographic clowns who will only stand for pictures and who do nothing for the community. But they still exist, and their performance over the last 2 to 3 decades shows by the fact that whatever they have done in the working class townships in South Africa, particularly in the very impoverished sectors, is the ways in which proselytization by the Christian organizations are setting up churches in these townships. In an area called Phoenix, where Gandhiji had his ashram, close by, the township was actually created for about 250,000 people, but there's more than 500,000. Mainly poor Indians. The problem, though, is that there are more than 2,000 churches because Americans are pumping in money into those churches to convert the poor Indian. They can't get across to the stronger middle class, so they're doing that to convert the poor Indian. And then they've tried to cut across with the Muslim areas as well to constrain the spread, or at least the presence of the Hindu centers there. You've got the ISKCON movement there, a temple there, you've got Ramakrishna Center, and then you also have Chinmaya Mission. So, and of course the Sai movement is quite strong as well. During COVID, lots of the organizations, almost all of them went out, tried to show what kinds of work they were doing in terms of looking after the poor, feeding them and whatever. So what occurred over time was that this conversation I had with this gentleman kept on harping upon what Modi and the RSS was doing. Now, at that particular stage, I know that I admired what they did. I see the RSS as a national reconstruction organization. People might have come across some who behave in a fascist way, but I wouldn't say everybody in the RSS are like that. In the same way that anybody from a particular family who behaves in a murderous or a rapist fashion cannot put the rest of the family to shame because of his actions, although we will all feel shame about it. The important thing is that there is a certain decorum and integrity that people live with. And we have to abide by that. Now, Yusuf kept on talking to me, and it went on to around 45 to 50 minutes. It was Saturday. By Wednesday, there was a court hearing, and Yusuf Didat's son went to court. in Verulam. It's a neighboring town to Durban. And he got shot dead. So I thought the man who called me on Saturday had paid for his karmic duty. I actually told people, this man here called me, and I was laughing at the wrong person. It wasn't the guy who called me. It was Ahmad Deedat's son, who, and Ahmad Deedat was very close to the Saudi king. He was very critical of every religion around him. He started with the Jews, then he took the Christians on, and then he took the Hindus on. But only the Hindus actually fought back harder than the other two religions. The others somewhat ignored him. And then when he got really sick, and he had a very severe stroke, the Saudi king sent his private jet to pick him up from Durban and take him to, I think, Riyadh, where they did his last rites and whatever else. Now, Wednesday, Yusuf Deedat got shot dead. Thursday, somebody called me and said, Anand, do you know that the conversation you had with this guy is on YouTube? And it's on ITV. So I said, well, I know. What would it be doing in ITV? Because when I was a student in London, I know independent TV existed in London. I did not know that there was an Islamic TV in South Africa. And the next day, I got responses from people. Look at what they're saying about you. He's such a Muslim hater. He derides Muslims. What kind of a human being is this? And yet I didn't say anything negative about Muslims. Every time he told me something about India, Modi, the RSS, and the Indian army in Kashmir, I responded as thoughts came to my mind. I did not attack him for being a Muslim, and I did not attack anything that could very well be seen as fascist that emanates from Muslim texts could be fascist, depending on how you wish to see it. I didn't raise any of those things. But this is what he accused me of. But ITV in South Africa is actually supported by BBC. Now, BBC, as you all know, has a record of doing all the wrong things to perhaps sometimes the right persons. And they have to live up for whatever they have been doing against people who actually don't deserve that kind of negative attention. Now, having said all of this, I thought back and wondered how I was actually going to take in what this guy was doing. When I listened to that YouTube commentary, he combined my conversation with him with a conversation he had with another guy by the name of Salman Khan. Nothing to do with your actor around here. But this was a Salman Khan that came from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And he came to South Africa around about 2000 to teach youngsters cricket. And he liked the place so much, and the Muslims took him under their wing, and they liked him so much that they kept him as a coach, especially for their Muslim children. That's none of my business, and I don't care what he does with his time. But he's now currently very active in doing things that are unfavorable towards India's national interest. It's also very unfavorable towards whatever is going on. And I think Modi is in South Africa at the moment. And the same Salman Khan is actually in the front line with the Muslim Lawyers Association trying to get Modi arrested. I don't know if you guys heard that here. No. Are you aware of it? Anyone aware of that? Well, the Muslim Lawyers Association in South Africa are actually trying to arrest Modi. They put a couple of 100-page documents through to have him arrested. Now, Salman Khan is not the most favorite among the Hindus around there. He is doing a lot of work that is very unfavorable towards most people, including the government, because he accused the Department of International Relations and Cooperation of allowing them to formulate foreign policy under Hindu direction. And why was this the case? Because Hindu direction is being led by a person by the name of Anil Suklal. He's a contemporary of mine who's just retired as well, but they kept him on superannuation. And he's in charge of South and Southeast Asia continent. And he's Salman Khan was very peeved about that because of this. So what actually happened here was Salman Khan accused the Minister of Foreign Affairs of being influenced by Hindus. And he made the statement that more Muslims need to actually be taking over. So I thought about this carefully when it came back to my writing and when COVID set in. So I was just perhaps unfortunate or fortunate when my teaching started, and I normally cramp all of my teaching, or I used to cramp all of my teaching from early February to about the end of March, early April, so that I get all my marking done, my teaching done, setting the tests, and then getting ready for the mid-year exams, so that I can continue with my research and my postgraduate supervision. Some people prefer to teach in the latter part of the year. That's fine by me. So it worked out perfectly. Now, I had to think again about what we were going to do. So my lawyer sent a letter to Yusuf Ismail, and we took up a case against him. And the Department of International Relations and Cooperation as well also took up threatened to lay a charge against him. And before we could actually download this YouTube, it was taken out. So it was too late for us to actually keep it. And 2 weeks later, Yusuf Ismail called me to apologize. I said to him, no. You speak to my lawyer, and if he says yes, you give it to me in writing. I'm not accepting anything in words only. He refused. We sent him another letter, but I also had no time to start a legal case here because those things are very, very expensive and draining. So I preferred not to do that. As far as he might be concerned, it might still be on. I don't even know. Well, that too, I think my lawyer has even forgotten about it. But, then I thought after I finished my teaching, COVID set in by March 15th. And there was not even a soul to be seen in the street. No cars, no bicycles. Nobody was going to the beach because I live nearby, across the road from the beach. It was the most horrific period that I think all of us have been going through. And I had to think, how am I going to keep my sanity in this period? Because when I started reading up about these pandemics, it normally took at least a full year to 2 years to complete. I estimated this to actually be around 2 years. And I was right in retrospect. So I started writing. I changed the topic several times. And I put together all of these ideas that happened in this conversation with Yusuf Ismail and the BBC supporting ITV, and with the latest information about how much the British actually took away from India in terms of $45 trillion worth of loot that they stole, and Shashi Tharoor's book coming out on the Inglorious Empire. And then, of course, reading books by Jai Sai Deepak, Sanjeev Sanyal, Shashi Tharoor's book itself. So what I saw in those books was a lot about India itself. What I'm not seeing, though, was how it is that these isms are actually destroying the world and how swiftly they are eroding. The only thing that's actually holding the American hegemonic power together is the military might of the Americans. You know, the Americans fought against Vietnam, Cambodia, Cuba, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. So, now, they created massive destruction all over the world. But they didn't win a single war. They had to retreat each time. So it actually tells you, I mean, why would those rich, well-to-do middle-class children from America who are taught values of passion and considerateness with high school and tertiary education awaiting them with promising jobs and families to follow, go and fight wars that are not theirs? Because once they go into the real field and they see what death is all about, then they enter into a conflictual mode much faster than anything else would. And you take away that, and you'll see that America will actually not survive that. And that is one of the reasons I believe, and I could be wrong, that they signed the Minsk agreement with Ukraine and Russia, and in that period started arming Ukraine until they thought Ukraine could actually take on the Russians. And to date, Ukraine hasn't been able to take on the Russians or to finish them off. And America and the 30-member NATO nation hasn't been able to do that either. So the situation, these situations collectively entered my mind to a point where I had to put these things together. Because here, people of a Muslim background who, I'm sorry to say, but who continuously in the South African media have been attacking Hindus, trying to see Hindus as an extension of the BJP and the RSS in South Africa, which is the furthest thing from the truth, forced people, including myself, to write back at them to correct their knowledge about us. And, you know, Goebbels made a very important statement. Keep saying the lie that you are guilty of until people get to believe you as the right thing. Or, on the other hand, project the wrong that you are doing onto your enemy as though they are equally guilty of what you are guilty of. Now, most South Africans don't even give a damn about Indian politics. So why should I be writing this book here? But I'm an academic, and I have an interest in the Indian diaspora. And over and above that, I also do things that are of different consequences to people in the academic world, and much to some people's annoyance as well, I've done things that went against the tide of what people would like to believe in. Now, because I was picked out for supporting Hindutva, the RSS, and the BJP, I asked myself, am I actually showing admiration and support for a fascist organization? And I need to do a bit more reading onto that. So I took Ram Madhav's book and I read through that. And I took Golwarkar's book and I read that. And I didn't find a single anti-minority statement in any one of those books. So where was all of this coming from? Now, I'm going to use a bit of a strong word, because the moment you say, and this is what people are doing, the moment you say Hindutva, it's like saying Hitler's Nazism. So what people are actually trying to do is to bastardize the word Hindutva. And I said I'm going to use that word. And that's why I'm using it here. Because whatever I've read of Hindutva has been nothing but positive. and it threatens, in many ways, the established isms in the world. Taking capitalism, so I started from an historical background and looked at Romans and Romanism. The Romans were the first to actually do what the British did in India. That is through indirect rule. They used the Indians to suppress their own people and did it brilliantly until people rose up against them. And eventually, the Romans themselves fell when the others started doing that to them. And then, of course, what happened after that was warlordism took over in Rome. And eventually the entire Roman Empire collapsed. And then we got Christianity. For the first 300 years of Christianity, it was a very peaceful religion. There was no problem with it, as far as my research took me. The real problem actually came with Christianity was when Constantine made the statement that he saw a cross in the sky after a battle, where the words en tau te Nikai appeared. I'm no expert in Latin, but en tau te Nikai means upon this cross, conquer. So he took that to conquer people and to fight Christianity. And thereafter, from his time, and he was a very successful warrior, he went about spreading Christianity through the sword. And anybody who did not adopt Christianity were non-believers. Until Islam started doing that. Now, Christianity in itself did not, it invented the word. Islam appropriated it, and Christians have actually stopped using it. Out of Christianity, from the time of Constantine, came Catholicism. So that was the first ism in Christianity. Then Protestantism. And when both were failing, then came secularism, which is also failing. Because secularism is also a failed motto, or a failed ideology, in the sense that it means different things to different people all over the world. And that's why the West, who have adopted this and are using it to their advantage all over the world, are enjoying people actually using these democratic processes under the guise of secularism. So that in itself has fallen. When the East India Company dominated in India, the Church of England found out about the riches in this country and how much the East India Company was taking back to England. And when the Church of England decided that they want a slice of this pie, they decided, no, they're not going to have it. East India Company said, Hindus will not accept another religion in their country because they're content with what they have. At that particular point in time, the Church of England had almost the entire population at their behest. So they mobilized. And from every district, they put together a petition which got a whole lot of people to sign. They took it to Parliament and they discussed and debated it, and then they passed a resolution to say the Church of England has a right to be in India. And that's when they made the entry. There was almost total Christian population in England then. A Pew survey, PEW survey recently showed that less than 30% of the British have anything to do with Christianity anymore. So this is where this year actually falls. And it falls flat. Now, that is the death of the first ism. Then came Islam. Of course, people might not like to say, and I'm not being specific to Islam, but the ways in which Islam have spread and the kind of violence that they often use, the aggression that they use to actually get their word across, is not something that is acceptable in this particular day and age. During apartheid, or even prior to the fall of apartheid, socialism became even more aggressive. Socialist countries were killing one another, were killing their citizens to a point where you think hard about whether there was any good sense about the equality that they were trying to achieve. But on the other hand, they eventually found out that it was a non-workable model because of how the bureaucrats refused to let go of their own personal property while they got everybody else to equalize and to collectivize and share whatever they had. Now, it is important for us to understand here that socialism is dead and it's gone. In Islam, the rise of violence, the rise of the number of ex-Muslim groups throughout the world is an indication of the extent to which there's going to be an erosion of beliefs in this religion as well. It has not happened before, but it's going to happen here again. People are not going to accept the kind of beliefs that Muslims actually have that are central to their scriptures. And I'm not making an anti-Muslim statement here. The situation in Iran, for instance, when a woman just didn't have a scarf properly put on her head and had been killed for that, is an unacceptable thing. Okay? And then when still women don't know what kind of place they might have in heaven, whereas men's places are already chosen in heaven, is going to become a gender issue over time to a point where it's going to be discussed more openly. So this is another ism that I believe is going to lose its force as well. Capitalism came before socialism. Now, in capitalism, we had three major writers that I focus on here. All of them are pretty prominent. One of them is Adam Smith, who's talked about the circulation of capital in a way or in ways that allowed people to actually use that money to keep people employed. Then you had John Maynard Keynes, whom up to this day people are not sure whether was a socialist or a capitalist. But he wrote so brilliantly, he actually confused everybody. But he wrote with a very good heart and mind, and for that reason he was actually quite admired. And then, of course, the real culprit who's responsible for all the capitalist upturns and turmoil in the world today is Milton Friedman. In the 1970s, when he spoke about share capital, which eventually grounded itself to a point where by the early 2000s, it started taking root. And he made a point that investors and corporates don't have to, and it affects every one of us sitting here, everywhere in the world. Investors and corporates are not in any way answerable to the shareholders in their purchase of shares and investments of their money. It's only the elite clique at the top. By 2007, that kind of policy actually showed what kind of attention was being given to the people below it, and eventually we had the 2008 crash in the finance sector in the United States. And ever since then, the financial sector of the world has never settled. So here again, the Americans are continuously printing money to a point where that money is being used only to uphold a false system, because it's not really a system that is, a capital base that is out of any measure of productivity, material productivity. And the Chinese are seeing that. The Indians are seeing that. And the result is that we know now that the dollar is at a very weak point. And very soon, American hegemony will have to face a multipolar country and a multipolar situation where they no longer hold the edge over the rest of the world. So once the Ukrainian-Russian war is over, the United States is actually going to face a totally different reality when China starts pushing up their assertion in a much harder way. And of course, the Indian strategists as well, from what I gather, are working equally hard to ensure that the rupee takes a good place in the world of international currencies as well. So Americanism and capitalism there is failing hopelessly as well. And of course, in the end, socialism has equally failed. But the worst culprit of it all here, in socialism, I don't know if you'll know that, but Shashi Tharoor actually brought it out in his book. Of all the socialists, was Karl Marx the worst possible racist you could ever find. He's the worst racist you could ever find, because he believed that India had to be ruled by the English, and it had to be brought to the standards of the European, because India had no history. India has no history according to Karl Marx. And who would have thought this man had swept the world with his policy of equalities all over, and thinking that we would actually be counting on him to find a way to ensure that we find an alternative to the ruthlessness of capitalism. Now, I'll read out to you what Karl Marx has said. Indian society has no history at all, at least no known history. What we call its history is but the history of the successive intruders who founded their empires on the passive basis of that unresisting and unchanging society. And that's what the West thought of tribal societies. And that's what Karl Marx thought of India. The question, therefore, is not whether the English had a right to conquer India, but whether we are to prefer India conquered by the backward Turk, by the backward Persian, by the Russian, to India conquered by the Briton. England has to fulfill a double mission in India. One, destructive. The other, one, regenerating the annihilation of the old Asiatic society and the laying of the foundations of Western society in Asia. So all those Marxists that you have around you undermining you, I'm sorry if there's any Marxists among you, but if there are any Marxists sitting here, use this perhaps to review your knowledge about what Karl Marx has said and done about this society. It reminds you, of course, of Fox News as well. Now, in the two, if I may use George Bush's terminology, when he spoke about Iraq as the nexus, what did he say was? The nexus of terrorism, is it? For me, against these isms, the whole of the Middle East and Europe, and I'm not being racist or xenophobic, but the world's problems over the last 2,000 years actually emanate from the Middle East and Europe. And it is time that their hegemonic control over the international economy actually change hands. And I'm not saying that China should take over under the leadership of somebody like Xi Jinping either. Xi Jinping right now, from the way I assess him, is no less a monster than some of the American presidents and the Democratic Party. People in America refer to the Democratic Party now and increasingly seeing how racist they've been. If anybody is actually exposing the racism in the Democratic Party at the moment, strangely, is Vivek Ramaswamy from the, who's standing for the presidency in the Republican side. And he's doing a great job at that. Now, it is for this reason that I've picked on the on the Lakota in the United States, the biggest tribe in the United States, the Aztecs in Mesoamerica, the Chinese Confucianism and Taoism, and then, of course, I converge all of these here into what Swami Vivekananda has taught us about, what his teachings tell us about Sanatana Dharma and trying to become the perfect individual. What is important in Confucianism and Taoism is that when each individual tries to become a perfect one, and that's what the Bhagavad Gita also teaches. The Bhagavad Gita for me is not a religious document. It is about conditioning your mind to become a perfect person. And that's what Taoism and Confucianism also teaches. That's what Buddhism teaches. And becoming the perfect person also means being able to relate to your ecosystem, the natural surroundings that you actually have. What emanated from the Middle East and from Europe does not have that. Because in the Middle East, it's only sand. In Europe, it's mainly snow. Those are areas of scarcity. And they had to go outwards in order to try and accumulate wealth. And going outwards to accumulate wealth required being violent, required capturing. When Indians were already in contact with so many other parts of the world, they did not have to conquer anyone to actually engage in trade with them. Now, I went to the Konark Temple when I was in Bhubaneswar last week, and I was with a British woman and another friend from Udaipur. And very interestingly in that temple, and I had to tease this British woman because at least she admitted, I mean, it's not that that I was being facetious. Amidst all of those sexually explicit carvings around the Konark Temple, in one remote little corner, which is a 13th century temple, there was a giraffe. And I asked her, why do you think this giraffe is so important here? She shook her head. I don't know. I said, when was the Europeans actually discovering the New World? Around the 16th century, she said. So when did the Enlightenment period start? Around after the 17th century. So if you were discovering the New World in the 16th century, this is a 13th century temple. How would Indians know about the giraffe, which is only found in Africa? She said, I have to start reading my history. I have to start reading my history. And, you know, the strange thing is, and when I sold my house, after my children grew up and they all parted ways and started finding jobs out of Durban, one is in Thailand, two were in Johannesburg, one came back. I decided that I always liked the sea area, so I sold up. I bought near the beach. And I was the first Indian to actually buy in a block of apartments where there were 16. And right next door to me was a Scottish guy. And I know across the average lot of people, I am better educated than most people, perhaps on Indian history. We got along for the first 10, 15 minutes, shook hands, he came to my place, and he made the most nasty, not nasty, but he thought he was making a great statement. He said the Indians could never have had a better set of colonizers than the British. He was Scottish. So I said, it's my first day here. How do I now start bringing this guy down to size before I even have my first sleep here? So I said to him, look, we'll talk later. Let's see how we can actually work around this. But I'll give you some information to read, and then you can tell me. So when I did give him some information after 2 weeks, he didn't come in front of me for the next 2 weeks. So, you see, people's ignorance is going to take a long way to wear off. The idea that Hindutva is a swear word is what people who don't want to see happen. In the sense that the West is against it, because one very important point about Hindutva is that it allows, according to Deen Dayal Upadhyay, the highest paid earner in any country should not earn 10 times more than the lowest paid person. It's one of the basic principles that they work with. And it is about treating people with equality. And Golwalkar himself made an extremely important statement with respect to the different minorities' religions. And, you know, he did something which shut up a number of people who were already using Golwalkar to run down Hindutva. And I was hardly aware of what he had said. So one of the things that, and I won't take long to finish up from here, that is central to what Hinduism is, was stated by Rabindranath Tagore. Love is the only reality, and it is not a mere sentiment. It is the ultimate truth that lies at the heart of creation. Bigotry tries to keep the truth in its hands with a grip that kills it. Bigotry tries to keep the truth in its hands with a grip that kills it. Now, Golwalkar, on the other hand, was being seen, and I don't know how many of you might have read him, every religion in India has a place. And that's what is important. So, this is what this book is about. I am trying to see what reactions I get from here, because I think people who are not familiar with the texts of Hindutva progenitors, the current writers among them, Ratan Sharda being the other, I think these people need to be read a lot more, appreciated more. I think India has a lot to contribute to global peace through the philosophy of Hindutva. But people are not allowing it because just out of fear of their missionary zeal not taking root anywhere else in the world. Islam, and through Ghazwa-e-Hind, is not going to take over India if Hindutva predominates. The Christian missionary movements are not going to spread Hinduism spread Christianity and get rid of Hinduism as much as they would like to. Because right now, as you might know, Walmart, for instance, has bought into some of the biggest churches in the world. That's largely to actually create a singular global market for themselves. And then, of course, socialism is already dead. Hindutva also has very important ingredients to discuss and take forward ideas about how individual self-accumulation of material wealth can be used. And I don't think this has been properly debated and discussed, but the Tata model, for instance. If the Tata's wealth was not in a trust, then Ratan Tata and whoever succeeds him would be the richest forever in the world. But the fact that it's in a trust and it continues, I don't know how much or to what extent there might be exploitativeness behind the Tata's projects. But I know I've been hearing and I've been seeing that whenever a Tata project is up, then tremendous infrastructure around that comes up as well. When people start over-accumulating wealth, they don't have to use it like the way Bill Gates is using it. Because what capitalism has actually done is create the worst monsters in the world. And Western-style individualism is very different from the Eastern pattern of individualism. The Enlightenment period during European colonialism was about rationality and reasoning and about individualism. The Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, the philosophy around Confucianism and Taoism is also about reasoning, rationality, and individualism. But American capitalist individualism is about the winner takes all. Eastern individualism is about becoming a perfect citizen and leading by example. And that's the kind of individualism that I think India has to offer the world. I'll stop at that.
Recently, our Prime Minister has come up with Pancha Prana. So one of the prana that is there, that is second one, is about not accepting the colonial and neo-colonial designs. I think that is the context in which I came to know him. In the field of anthropology, there is a international body. It is called International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences. Now there is an institution in India which is being manned by Indians, and we are trying to teach the indigenous children. And there is this institution called Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences, which is teaching nearly 40,000 children and giving them all kinds of facilities. So the profit that they are earning from engineering and medical, they are transferring that, and this is a kind of sustainable model they're creating. Now in Brazil, in 2018, the hosting of the Congress was given to KISS, that is Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences. And then we had all kinds of people that he also mentioned, and in this book it is also given. And they then started creating a propaganda. And propaganda was that they are converting people into this and that, all kinds of propaganda. They didn't come in front. They all wrote in pseudonyms. But they made such a big propaganda that the International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, they decided to withdraw from Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences. This was not liked by Indians, and I think they thought we will be bullied by them. We'll accept it. But except for very, very minuscule anthropologists, most of us, nearly 700 of us, decided to fight them head on. We said that now that it was given to the Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences, it will be held in Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences. And we created what is called as UIAF, United Indian Anthropological Forum. And only last week we completed that Congress. So in that connection, we had come across Anandji. And Anandji is himself, although he's written about Hindutva, and I would say that, it's like if you want to know that earth is round, you have to be in the Chandrayaan, so then you can know Earth is round. You can see Earth round. But while we are on the Earth, we don't see that it is round. So we take things for granted about India, about the strength of India, about our history, about Hindutva and our heritage that we have. But he is somebody who is seeing from a distance. And therefore, when you see it from a distance, you get a different kind of insight. And that insight that we heard from him, so it was not only an interpretation of Hindutva, it is again a kind of, I would say that, about what has happened and the historical and, all kinds of geopolitical things. And in fact, at one point of time, he even told us what is going to happen now, So that is rarely, anthropologists rarely indulge in these kind of macro, politics. But this book is about. And this book is about what India means, what India is. And, we may agree with him, we may not agree with him. And I think that is the Indian tradition. The Indian tradition is a critical tradition. Indian tradition is not that we have a book and we'll accept it and there won't be any question. We always have we always have Vedas and we have Upanishads and we have Puranas. We have got Bhashyas, we have got Tikas, people are interpreting, people are sometimes, So that kind of a critical, that tradition that we have in India. And that I think is the beauty of India. And there are people who are, who may be believing in this and who may not be believing in this. And all of them, we take them together, that is what critical tradition of India is all about. And I think that is the strength of India as well. And now he has talked about, of course, 4 isms that he has talked about. And in fact, about Karl Marx, racism, that is a new thing that I've heard. Yes, he talked about Asiatic mode of production and he, talked about maybe, opium and all those kind of things. And of course, he was Eurocentric in his views. Undoubtedly, that was Eurocentric equality that he was talking about. And we have, alternative interpretations which are coming up. And I think I would like to mention here Snakes in the Ganges, that Malhotra Sahab, Rajiv Malhotra, who is also. So these are these voices that are coming. And I think these voices are coming not because we are, I think this is, now India is coming off the, I think, stage as well. And that is what we are now looking at the world from a different kind of a confidence that perhaps we never had before. Had this International Union of Anthropological Ethnological Sciences done the same thing 20 years ago, maybe we would have accepted it. Maybe we would have accepted it. But I think now we are asserting, and I think India is trying to assert. India is trying to question. But when India is trying to question, we must remember that when India tries to question, then we are not unreasonable because we have a tradition of critical thinking. We have a tradition, in India we say Satya. Truth is called Satya. And Satya is Sat and Tat. And truth is not an end. We say Satyam eva jayate, which means truth is a process. Ultimately, so it is a process. It's like, Hegelian dialectic, where we say thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So truth is not synthesis. Truth is thesis and its antithesis. Indians are never ready, never would accept anything as end. No. It is always, the truth is dynamic, it is always evolves. And I think that is the beauty of India. Now, Indians, we say, now he has talked very well about Indian isms and how that is related to sustainability and all those kind of things that he has talked about. Now, in India, we have 2 dictums. One is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. I take these two as the core of Indian philosophy. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Now, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is not about human beings' family. It's not about human being, word is a human family. No. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The whole earth is a family. And when he says the whole earth of the family, human beings are part of it. So there is everything that is there on the earth. That is part of the family, and we must understand. And therefore, this particular dictum is talking about not only human beings, but also animals, plants, even the natural features, geographical features. Everything is linked to with each other. And that is what that ecological sense we are talking about. That is what, that climate change, dictum that we are going to. Secondly, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. It is again not about human. Not all humans should be, happy. Everybody. So, human and others. So, that is the kind of, that vastness that we have in our Indian tradition, Indian philosophy. I think we'll have to see it from that point of view. So, it is not about a group of people in India. No, it's about everybody. It includes Christians, it includes Islam, it includes Buddhism, it includes Jain, it includes Chinese, whosoever is there in the world. And their, and the people or their environment, everything included. So that is the kind of spirit that we go. And therefore, I think when he is talking of alternative global ideology, this Sarve Bhavantu Sukhna, that's why it has been taken by G20. Sarve Bhavantu Sukhna and Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, I think that is the core of the global ideology that I don't know whether he meant it or not, but I personally, think that is the kind of core of that ideology that we are trying to use. So I think this book, like he said, it is it's like I would say a very critical thinking. It's not a straightforward. It's not. He's not just saying something. He's backing them with like a true academician. He's backing them up with an argument, and he says that you may agree, may not agree, and that is again, he's not saying you have to agree with me. That is again an Indian, Indian critical perspective that is there within him, and that he is talking to. So, I have not read the book, sir. So therefore, I may not be, talking about it. But then, yes, I think you are in the line of that alternative thinking that I think this nation as a confident nation now is embarking upon. And therefore, in that sense, I would like to welcome you for your thoughts, because your thoughts are giving us a South African perspective on the churning that is going on in this country. So with these words, I think I am very grateful to be the chair in your Gyanpath book discussion.